BARK Radio.
What's good, everybody? It's Robo from All Bark back with another video, and today I'm bringing you my college football week 3 picks. We've got some big time games around the FBS this week and some conference play starting up. Before we get into picking those games, let's go ahead and recap how week 2 went for the channel. Week 2 was a crazy one, some huge upsets and some crazy finishes, and it wasn't a great week for the picks. I went a bit under 500 this week at 23 and 27 overall against the spread, and just 6 and 7 picking the closer spread straight up. But the more we see these teams play, the more we learn about the talent level and tendencies of each team. And although Vegas gets sharper, we can make better decisions at the same time. So with that said, let's dive into week 3, starting with Thursday night. Week 3 starts Thursday with NC State at Wake Forest, which I expect to be a pretty high scoring game. NC State's defense has looked pretty rough to this point, and I think it's clear the offense can score a lot of points led by CJ Bailey, especially against a team like Wake Forest. On the Wake side, I don't believe in this team at all, especially Robbie Ashford. They scored a ton last week, but Western Carolina has an abysmal defense. With that said, I think it's clear Wake can run the football with Claiborne and Ashford, and Virginia ran all over NC State a week ago. But the Wolfpack offense was the difference maker in that game and will be again this week. Give me NC State by about a touchdown on the road, 34-27. Colorado heads to Houston in the middle of a now 3-deep quarterback competition, and apparently they're starting Ryan Staub, not the stud freshman Julian Lewis or the star transfer Caden Salter this week. But regardless, I'd still expect all three to get some run as Coach Prime looks for the guy that he trusts the most this year. And as a squad, they don't look bad, but a quarterback competition going into a road conference game against a team who looks improved from week 1 to week 2 is a pretty tough spot to side with. I think this could be a lower scoring game. Colorado's D-line can cause some problems, and Houston's defense has played great to this point against weaker competition. But I'm feeling Houston at home as the right play here, 23-17. I don't really have words for how bad Kansas State has played this season. Not having Dylan Edwards has definitely hurt, but they look flat out awful in a ton of areas. Nobody's taken over. The offense is struggling to score consistently. The defense is giving up play after play. Army was nothing short of a terrible loss. The Tarleton State loss was not much of a fluke to me. Army replaces a ton of production and just walked into Manhattan and beat Kansas State in week 2. So I have zero faith in them on the road here and in what could be a winnable game. Noah Fafita has looked great to start the season for Arizona as well, so maybe he's back to his 2023 form where he was establishing himself as a future star for the Wildcats. I'm going to ride with Noah Fafita and Arizona at home Friday night, 33-28. I've been really low on this UCLA team entering the year, and they've proved me right so far in the Utah and UNLV losses. They battled back in that UNLV game, but the score was looking ugly through 3 quarters. New Mexico has some guys. We saw them compete with Michigan a little bit in week 1. UCLA is far, far worse than Michigan, though, but I do fear the athleticism advantage UCLA has could take over in this game. The spread isn't even at 3 scores either, but based on what I've seen so far and expectation of playing up to your opponent, I really don't mind taking New Mexico to cover. But it's really going to depend on if we see UCLA come out and play the way they did in last week's 4th quarter, or if they revert back to what they look like outside of that to this point, which will give New Mexico a genuine shot. But I'll take UCLA 35-23. Oregon heads to Northwestern this week, and I genuinely think the Ducks look like a top 3 team in the country right now. They are absolutely obliterating defenses. 69-3 is a ridiculous score against a Power 5 opponent, no matter how bad they are. As for Northwestern, they looked decent last week, but the opponent obviously had an impact on that. This offense couldn't do anything against Tulane, and Preston Stone may get turnover happy against a defense like Oregon's. That defensive front is going to wreak havoc in the backfield and can completely shut down Northwestern for 4 quarters. I'm taking Oregon by 5 scores, 41-7. Clemson heads to Georgia Tech this weekend in a must-win scenario. They looked terrible in last week's first half, going down 16-0 to Troy at home, and now have a lot of doubters in terms of their playoff potential. In this matchup, though, I'm worried about Georgia Tech's rush offense against Clemson's front 7. It's been the offense having issues for the Tigers, not the defense, and that side of the ball has some dogs. If they're making big stops early, I could see this being the game Clemson's offense finally wakes up. After that Troy scare, they've got to know they need to come to play to beat a quality Georgia Tech team on the road. Tech can absolutely steal this game if Clemson comes out flat yet again, but this does feel like a buy low scenario on Clemson with a spread all the way down to 3.5. So give me the Tigers to finally look right this week, 30-24. Oklahoma's got a weird game this week on the road at Temple, and although it's a weird spot, I don't really see a hangover happening here with Oklahoma after beating Michigan last week. That defense looked absurdly good, and they're one of the 10 most talented teams in the country, in my opinion. Schedule aside, of course. Temple has looked good to start the year, but against UMass and Howard, Evan Simon has been lights out, though, at quarterback and could absolutely continue that momentum into this week's game. This just feels like one Oklahoma could either completely dominate or sleepwalk through completely and let Temple hang around. I'm going to take Oklahoma 35-13. I probably shouldn't have doubted Alabama as much as I did after the Florida State loss. They flat out dominated ULM, and yes, it is just ULM, but that was an incredible performance from a clearly pissed off team. This week they host Wisconsin, who's really no match for Alabama to me. They were really struggling with Middle Tennessee for the majority of that game until a late surge of points made it a more lopsided score. Daniel O'Neal had a solid game statistically last week, but I still would rather have Billy Edwards out there for this game. So if Edwards is out again for the Badgers as it looks, give me Bama to dominate defensively again and continue the momentum big. 34-10. Michigan is badly in need of a strong game offensively to ease the fan base a bit. Expectations shouldn't have been very high early on with so much new in that offense and an 18-year-old quarterback. But they've got almost nothing going against an elite Oklahoma defense last week, and now Sherrone Moore begins serving his 2-game suspension. So I get why Central Michigan spread would be enticing, but Michigan's run defense is extremely good. Central put up a few points against Pitt, but I think this defense is just better and built to stop the only thing Central really wants to do on offense. So without a consistent rushing attack, Central can't run clock the way they like to, and I think Michigan gets a little healthier this week and scores enough to grab the cover and get it comfortable as an offense. I'll go 38-7. I've got to give respect to Troy. They looked great last week and punched Clemson in the mouth early and had the whole country watching a potential upset. They've established that they can really run the football. They've got a homegrown O-line and D-line that has shown up so far this season. I just wonder how well they'll be able to have a balanced passing attack against a team like Memphis, who looks really solid so far and isn't going to be overlooking this Troy team like Clemson was. I definitely favor the Tigers in this game, but because it's at Troy, I think we could get a great game that goes down to the wire. But Memphis' rushing attack themselves with Brendan Lewis and Sutton Smith is going to get this one done on the road, 28-23. Over to a MAC matchup, Buffalo's on the road at Kent State. Buffalo's defense is very legit. They held Minnesota just 23 points in week 1, who then exploded for 70 in week 2. And they'll be up against a Kent State offense who might be just as weak as the St. Francis team that they just played. Kent State flat out cannot score. They only scored in complete garbage time against Texas Tech and struggled to take down Merrimack in week 1. And with this being a conference game, Buffalo will want to start off right. They aren't going to struggle with a team this bad. I like Buffalo by a 41-14 final. Auburn and South Alabama could be a fun game. Auburn has looked great so far, and South Alabama can absolutely score, and proved that last week against a good Tulane team. This is still a mismatch game for sure, probably a 3-4 score differential, but I think South Alabama puts up at least a few offensive touchdowns in this game, which could be enough to secure a cover. They've got a solid quarterback in Bishop Davenport, a solid run game, an incredible receiver in Devin Voisin. The defense is the worry here, though, and could just run them out of the game completely. They just aren't going to stop Jackson Arnold in this offense. Auburn wins 45-21. UConn heads to Delaware this week after a tough OT loss at Syracuse. And man, I really like this Husky team. Looking at the schedule, if they had beaten Syracuse last week, I would have considered them an at-large playoff threat with just Boston College and Duke on the schedule as their real tough games. But unfortunately, they weren't able to hold on and lost in overtime. But regardless, they're definitely a legit Group of 5 team this season. And although Delaware showed that they can compete last week at Colorado, that game got out of hand later on, and I think UConn does more of the same with a short road trip. I've got the Huskies here, 34-20. Georgia at Tennessee might be the best game of the week. I don't really love either side of this game. I think Georgia is a better team on paper, but that's not what really matters. Their offensive line has some question marks, and I'm not a believer in the offense yet. Tennessee has looked really good to start the year and get this game at home, but they've got some key players out that can make this an even bigger challenge. And I don't know if Joey Aguilar is trustworthy against an elite program like Kirby Smart's yet. This should be a game that goes down to the wire, but I gotta trust that Kirby Smart's defense gets it done. Georgia wins by a score, 30-23. There's a lot to love about this Texas Tech team right now. They're great in the trenches. The defense looks very solid. The offense is scoring at will right now. Even considering they've played nobody, it's been an absolute clinic. Oregon State, on the other hand, looks like an average Group of 5 team at best. It's tough to see what that program has fallen to right now, and I have faith that they can get it back with the new look Pac-12 coming soon. And I do like Malik Murphy, but the reality is Texas Tech is in a much better spot right now and should have no issues rolling over Oregon State at home if Fresno State was able to beat this team in their own building. I like Tech big, 45-17. The USC offense has been absolutely incredible to start the season and honestly looks talented enough to hang on 30+ on anyone in the country. Purdue is their matchup this week, and although it's on the road, the Boilermakers are just not going to get in their way. Purdue has some solid talent and is solid in the trenches to me, but USC just has way too much firepower. I don't see anyone covering Jacoby Lane or Makai Lemon one-on-one, and I think at some point in this game, Purdue just mails it in as USC just cannot be stopped offensively. Give me USC to roll 42-14. North Texas really disappointed me last week. The defense did not look good on the road against a pretty bad offense in Western Michigan. Washington State finally got things going last week and really improved in that win over San Diego State, whose defense I think could be in the top half of the Mountain West. Looking at both of these teams, I just feel like I can trust Washington State to score points to this North Texas defense. It should be a really good game, though, and likely back and forth, as North Texas offense has put up over 80 points in their 2 games so far. With the inconsistency out of Washington State's offense, I can see this game going either way, so I'll go with North Texas to survive at home by a field goal, 34-31. SMU is at Missouri State this week, another weird road game for a Power 5 team, but a bit more understandable. However, as a matchup, Missouri State is severely outmanned. They lost by like 70 points to USC in week 1, and I don't really know yet if USC is even better than SMU. They can also score on anyone and are coming off a really tough loss to Baylor in overtime. I think they could win this one by 40 plus if they show up with consistency and are hungry to avenge that loss. So give me SMU in a bounce back blowout, 49-17. Pitt at West Virginia is one of the better rivalries in college football, but with maybe less hype this year than normal after West Virginia's loss to Ohio last week and the news that Jaheim White's out for the season. The Mountaineers couldn't move the ball in Ohio, which is a really bad sign for this game. I really trust this Pitt defense to have a day, and I think the Panther offense can really score on the ACC this year. I do think we see a different West Virginia team this week, though. Rivalry games are always interesting, and we're getting over a touchdown for the home team in this one. It's a riskier pick because Pitt could just blow the doors off of them, but give me Pitt to survive a tough battle on the road this week, 30-24. Iowa State at Arkansas State continues the trend of weird Power 5 at Group of 5 road games, and I think this one gives a similar vibe to the Oklahoma matchup a bit, with Iowa State coming off a massive win over Iowa. A difference maker, though, is Iowa State did not look too sharp offensively in that game, and this isn't a matchup that'll be very fun to get up for. For me, I think Iowa State won't have much trouble putting Arkansas State away, but the Red Wolves have a home run hitter style offense that can absolutely put up some points if the Cyclones are sleepwalking. The problem lies within the defense. It really depends how Iowa State comes to play. I just buy the down week aspects of this one with a spread over 3 touchdowns. Give me Iowa State by a 38-20 final. Missouri gets Louisiana this week after a big win over Kansas, and I think this game could just be really ugly. Louisiana's offense cannot throw the ball whatsoever. Even against McNeese State, the pass was not an option. And against this Missouri front, I don't think they'll find any rhythm running the ball either. Even Kansas couldn't run much on Missouri, and Bo Pribula has looked great for this offense so far. So is Ahmad Hardy. I think the Tigers should win this game by 5 to 6 scores if they keep their head on straight. I'll go 45-10. Texas gets another easy matchup this week with UTEP coming to town. This UTEP team has a lot to be desired, but they've got some legitimate weapons in Kenny Odom and Hashawn Wilson. And former 5-star quarterback Malachi Nelson looks like he's finally getting a bit more comfortable tossing 4 touchdowns against UT Martin last week. Texas is going to dominate this game, though, but I'm a bit worried about Arch Manning's arm after a couple shaky throws and a grimace after one of his passes. So with that factor, I just don't trust that they'll score enough to cover if UTEP finds any offensive success. I'm going to go with a 41-7 final for the Longhorns. South Florida pulled off an incredible upset over Florida in the Swamp last week and now gets another big road matchup at Miami, getting the same number as last week. Miami is better than Florida clearly as of right now, but I just don't get the 3-score number again. South Florida is a legitimate top 25 team in the country right now who just beat Boise State handily and a very talented Florida team despite some clear problems. So give me South Florida to cover again this week, although I don't think they'll pull off the upset for a 3rd straight time. Miami just has too much experience and talent and won't be surprised going to this one like Florida might have been. 37-24 Hurricanes. Liberty took an ugly loss last week against Jacksonville State, who's had a really solid 2 weeks so far compared to what I expected after losing basically everything. I haven't been a fan of Bowling Green to start the year, but they genuinely competed against Cincinnati, and I think they could repeat that success here with Liberty really struggling to start this season, especially with this being another road game for Liberty. I just don't trust that defense is going to be able to get stops and let their offense command games. Give me Bowling Green to at least cover and maybe even pull off the home upset, but I'll take Liberty close, 28-23. Middle Tennessee, Nevada could flirt with the worst FBS matchup of the week here. Nevada needed a pick 6 to beat Sacramento State last week, and Middle Tennessee State got blown out by an FCS program in week 1. But they did bounce back and competed for a half against Wisconsin before getting blown out in that second half. I honestly don't trust either of these teams, but Nevada is a very run-heavy team which could burn up clock and keep the scoring down. And I have no reason to back either side as a near double-digit favorite. So I think Nevada survives at home close, 27-21. FAU at FIU is a game I don't want to touch. FIU looked very competitive against Penn State, but I feel like that was just Penn State sleepwalking through that game. And when they woke up, it was a very quick blowout. And with FAU, they've got some players, especially on the offensive side of the ball with Easton Messer and Caden Veltkamp. But to me, these teams are very even from a talent standpoint, and it should be a great matchup with some back and forth offense. I just think FAU has a better unit that can help them pull off a road win here if I had to pick a side. So I'll roll with the Owls by a field goal, 30-27. Ohio State is at home again in Week 3, taking on the Ohio Bobcats. Ohio looks legit so far, but Rutgers and West Virginia are just not Ohio State. That's pretty obvious, but Julian Sand looks the part right now. He'll continue to get better, and I just have no clue how Ohio's going to be able to stop this offense. Maybe the elite Big Ten teams will, but Ohio's going to struggle defensively, and on the opposite side, Arvell Reese is like someone they have never seen before. Ohio State's DBs are going to lock up all game long, and this should be over a lot quicker than Ohio hopes for, in my opinion. I've got the Buckeyes big, 49-13. Illinois didn't necessarily outplay Duke from a play-by-play standpoint, but dominated the turnover battle and won every key moment they needed to make that game look pretty dominant for a final. This week, they're getting Western Michigan to come to town, and I think this Illinois defense will eat this offensive line alive. The pass rush has been great so far, and if the defense continues to just fly around and force turnovers, it'll just feed into the offense even more. Not like Altmaier really even needs it. I think the Illini come out ready to roll again this week with it being a night game as well, and this could get ugly fast. I've got a 42-6 final. Arkansas's offense looks incredible through 2 weeks, but they're getting tested in Week 3 on the road at Ole Miss. I don't think Ole Miss's defense is going to do a whole lot to change the way Arkansas has been playing, though, because that run game is working. And to their defense's favor, I think Austin Simmons' decision-making so far has definitely been questionable. With that said, though, Ole Miss's athletes on the offensive side should have a day as well. I really like these playmakers, and when Simmons is on his game, he can be great. I think Ole Miss survives a high-scoring game at home under the lights, as they're just the better team between the two to me. I'll go 38-31 final. Virginia Tech Old Dominion is an interesting game, honestly. Old Dominion has a dual-threat quarterback in Colton Joseph who can absolutely compete with lesser Power 5 programs. And Virginia Tech has looked really rough to start the year, but now has the opportunity to get right and take down a team they definitely should beat. Virginia Tech just has a different level of athletes in this matchup. I'll probably be on Old Dominion for most of their conference season if the lines are right, but Kyron Drones can use this game to really elevate his level of play heading into ACC season. And all they got to do is win this one by more than a touchdown to cover, which I definitely can see happening if they don't let Joseph run wild and get comfortable in the pocket. I've got Tech by a 34-23 final. Georgia Southern hosts Jacksonville State this week, and I'm worried about this Georgia Southern team right now. They look broken, the offense is scoring some points, but not in bunches, and the defense looks really, really bad so far. Fresno State put up 42 and ran it down their throat, and Jacksonville State is built the same. They want to run all day on you. On the other side, Georgia Southern can't really match that physicality, and Jacksonville State's defense has an edge. It being a road game makes it tough, but I do believe in what I've seen from these first 2 weeks. Give me Jacksonville State close, 31-28. Appalachian State at Southern Miss is another fun one in the group of 5, and right now I definitely lean towards App State on the road. Southern Miss no doubt is one of the more improved teams this season, but the Southern Miss O-line is still a bad unit. They've got some playmakers, but if you can't block, it's tough to win games against quality opponents. App State's been solid to start the year. Last week was definitely slow, but LSU transfer AJ Swan looks legit at quarterback. Dalton Stroman's a monster at receiver, and I don't see him slowing down too much on the road here. Give me App State to control the trenches and steal a win on the road, 34-28. We've got Florida at LSU this week, and both teams must have been looking forward to this matchup because Florida took a bad loss last week, no matter how good South Florida is. That's not a game you can really afford to drop at home. And then with LSU, they really sleepwalked through that Louisiana Tech game and didn't even come close to covering. The offense looked pretty dead and couldn't convert consistently. I think we see Florida get right this game, maybe out of desperation, but I definitely think they compete while the whole world doubts them. But in the end, LSU just has too much talent, and I really believe in Nussmeier late in games to take over. So I'll roll with LSU by just one score, 27-20. Notre Dame is back after the Miami loss, and they'll host Texas A&M in maybe this week's game of the week. Notre Dame did not look great in terms of play calling and trust in their offense in that loss. Just 10 carries with Jeremiah Love is pretty absurd to me, and I expect him to get a bigger workload throughout this game. But A&M has looked really good through 2 weeks despite not covering in either game. I believe in this defense's ability to step up and get some stops. Will Lee is a shutdown corner, and they've got a strong pass rush. Notre Dame's going to get theirs, though, and I think the Irish defense could really impact this game. If they create some pressure on Marcel Reed, they could definitely cause some mistakes. I think it goes down to the final drive, where Notre Dame survives by a field goal, 27-24. Eastern Michigan just dropped a home game to Long Island University and now has to go on the road at Kentucky. And while this Kentucky team is not very good, that's in comparison to the SEC and the Power 5. This should absolutely be a bloodbath. I mean, Kentucky beat Toledo, and I think Toledo could absolutely beat this EMU team by 3 scores at the minimum. It would have to be a pretty rough day for Kentucky, or a much different game out of EMU for this one to be close. Give me Kentucky big, 42-10. Iowa hosts UMass this week, and if this isn't the week we see the forward pass come out to play for Iowa, I'm not sure that's ever happening. UMass is flat out terrible, no disrespect, but they got absolutely embarrassed by Temple and then lost a home game to Bryant, and now their quarterback is out. Iowa should be able to cakewalk to a blowout win here, but in order to cover this spread, they're going to have to score 40 plus or get it close and shut UMass out. This is just a scenario where even though I know it won't be close, I just can't take Iowa to score that many points until I see their offense is capable of it. They only had 34 against Albany and threw for 48 yards in that game, so give me a 38-7 final for the Hawkeyes. Next is New Mexico State at Louisiana Tech. New Mexico State has sort of turned into an air raid offense. I trashed them a bit last week as one of the worst teams in the country, but I actually watched that game against Tulsa, and they outperformed my expectations quite a bit. That defense is getting stops, and they can actually move the football. Tulsa is also a bottom-tier Group of 5 team, but this Aggies team has more juice than I gave them credit for. With that said, Louisiana Tech just competed with LSU, losing by just 2 scores, and their defense so far has been pretty phenomenal for their standards. I think they drop down to the opponent a bit this week, though, and win a lower-scoring game this week over New Mexico State, 23-17. ECU at Coastal Carolina has seen a massive line shift throughout this week, majorly having to do with people realizing Coastal Carolina has looked absolutely terrible through 2 weeks. They got destroyed by Virginia and then scored just 13 points on Charleston Southern. ECU lost to NC State by just 7 and never stopped battling in that game, and then last week made easy work out of Campbell. I don't care that this is a road game. They showed up on a bigger stage already. ECU should control this game unless things drastically change for Coastal. East Carolina just looked much, much better. I'll go with a 33-21 win for the Pirates. Vandy out South Carolina should be a hell of a game. Diego Pavia is a dog and told the world he had this game circled this offseason. South Carolina's offensive line has some issues. If Vandy creates some pressure, they can definitely keep this game close on the road, and I trust Pavia to keep them in it late regardless. The spread is in a weird spot though, because although I favor Lenora Sellers to get the job done and survive, I could easily see Vandy keeping it to just 3. Or it could be a tied game late that South Carolina scores and wins by a touchdown. But I gotta go with my gut that this one's gonna end up close. Give me the Gamecocks 28-24. Utah heads to Laramie this week to take on Wyoming, and a little info on this Wyoming team is that they really cannot score, but their defense is actually pretty competitive. However, Utah's offensive line might be the best in the entire country, and Devon Dampier is incredibly talented, especially escaping the pocket. I doubt he struggles to find his groove, honestly, and the Utes figure out that defense pretty quickly. And because of their advantage on the other side of the ball, they're able to cover on the road. I've got a 34-7 final for Utah. Duke at Tulane is a coin flip type of game to me. I think it'll be a bit of a defensive battle. Duke was able to move the ball against Illinois, but kept shooting themselves in the foot with bad turnovers, and Tulane is great at taking the ball away. And on the other end, while Tulane's offense has looked good, Duke's defense is definitely a solid unit. I've talked about their secondary before. I think both sides can get stops in this game. The question is, does Duke play a cleaner game this week, which would give them a good shot to win on the road? And I'm going to trust that they learn from last week and do just that. I've got the Blue Devils by a field goal, 27-24. Navy is on the road this week at Tulsa. Tulsa looked awful last week at New Mexico State, and that's a much different offense than one like Navy's. On top of that, this Tulsa coaching staff is pretty new. I don't know if they'll be ready to stop a Service Academy offense as is. Although Navy didn't do what I thought they'd do last week against UAB, there were some weather issues with rain delays, and they were just out of rhythm a bit. I really think Navy should dog walk this game against Tulsa. I've got them by 3 scores, 38-21. For the 3rd week in a row, I'm going to be fading Akron completely. This team is god-awful, honestly. They can't score at all, and literally haven't yet. And they've got zero motivation to get any better either with the bowl ban like I've mentioned in previous weeks. I just don't see a scenario where they're able to get up for games like every other team would. And UAB just competed with Navy for 4 quarters. So I'm taking UAB here, 35-17. Next is a late night slate, starting with Air Force at Utah State. This Utah State O-line is really bad so far, giving up a bunch of sacks. So I expect Air Force to get some pressure and end some possessions. But the Utah State offense can still score, as we've seen, and that makes this a toss-up game to me. I don't really like the spread above 3 when Utah State has home field advantage and might even be a better team in general. We've only seen Air Force play once against Bucknell, so I'll roll with the Aggies at home, 28-23. Arizona State, Texas State could be a sneaky good game and not one I really want to bet on. The spread feels almost dead on as to where I'd put it. Arizona State clearly is not the same team from a year ago, but still is a good group, and Texas State can flat out compete. They're without a doubt one of the 10 best Group of 5 teams in the country, who just went on the road and beat another one of those teams in UTSA. Arizona State will win this game as it's at home and they need to bounce back, but I just don't know if the final score will be above a 2-score win, honestly. Texas State is just playing great on offense right now, so I'll take Arizona State by just 14, 38-24. Minnesota's going to get tested this week on the road at Cal. Looking at the matchup, Minnesota's front seven is solid. Coy Parrish is a superstar. John Nestor is breaking out. And with the offense, the run game is incredibly good, and Drake Lindsey does look solid. With Cal, they've got a future star in JKS at quarterback who started his career on fire and looks the part. But I'd lean towards Minnesota having the advantage at pretty much everywhere else. Cal's got the home field advantage, though, which can really affect things in college football. Minnesota has to protect the football. I trust their defense to create pressure and get some stops, and their run game should be able to control the line of scrimmage enough to escape with a road win to me. I've got Minnesota winning this game by 3, 23-20. Boston College travels all the way across the country to Stanford this week, and although the travel makes things harder, Stanford is just terrible. We saw that last week at BYU and saw it before at Hawaii. They just cannot score, and the defense isn't great either. Boston College may have lost last week, but I thought they outplayed Michigan State on the road, and Dylan Lonergan looks legit to me. This could be a bit closer because of that travel, but I just have zero faith in Stanford keeping themselves in games. Give me Boston College by 2 scores, 34-20. That's it for my Week 3 picks. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on any of these games and your predictions, as well as any ideas you have for content on the channel in the future. As always, thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
BARK Radio.